Hello, this is Life Talk, and I'm Mark Crutcher, President of Life Dynamics. Joining me, as always, are my co-hosts Renee Hobbs and Destiny Herndon de la Rosa. Hello, ladies. How are y'all today?
Hello.
Well, the beat goes on in the pro-life movement. Because of all the victories that the pro-life movement is having right now, the media is working overtime. I know both of y'all have seen it. Renee and I have talked about it, and I know you've seen it too. One of the most outrageous ones to me is this new study by the University of Texas, supposedly, the Texas Policy Evaluation Project, where they're now saying that all these women in Texas, because we've taken away the funding from Planned Parenthood for their abortion business, that all these women are self-aborting in Texas. Well, here's the question I have. How do we know this is true from their little tiny survey that they did, that this is happening all over?
Well, and it's wrong, but my first thought was, where are the deaths? Where are all the deaths?
Well, that's
that
what
we
I
were
was going to get
hear
to.
about?
If this is so dangerous and all these women are doing it, why aren't we stepping over the dead bodies of women in the streets?
That's what was supposed to
Yeah,
happen.
it was a survey that they had put out, and in the questionnaire it said, have you ever self-induced? It doesn't talk about are you 486, it doesn't talk about any of the chemical abortions, and ask if their best friend self-induced. So it's so...
And I mean, I think if you've ever been in high school with a girl who's panicked and thought she was pregnant, I think that could mean a lot of things, whether it's, like drinking too much NyQuil or, doing something like that. So I think a lot falls under, like you said, what exactly is self-induced? Is it your boyfriend punching you in the stomach? Is it, or is it something where you actually went in and were trying to get your hands on actual prescriptions to abort?
Right, and this was any time. It wasn't from the year 2013 up. It was
any time in your life.
Time in your life. So it's just so, it's
well,
false.
and this is such a good example of not only the dishonesty of the abortion industry, but of their lackeys in the media. Because let's just say that we came up with a study that said this, and this, horrible things about abortion. They would come to us and say, I want to see all your research. I want to see your documentation on this. Who did you cite on this? What are the qualifications of the people that you cite? What are your qualifications to do this study? None of that was done here.
They're not, no, and they're not going to do it because they want people to see that and freak out.
And freak out and think that women are just dropping dead all over the state of Texas.
Well, and even if you clicked in and read the article, you could see all of the issues where it was kind of wonky math, but they don't expect anybody to click in. They expect you to see that headline and then be sitting over brunch with your girlfriends being like, did you hear that, thousands of women have been aborting in Texas because of our clinics closing down? It's completely false and inaccurate data.
They're lying. They're lying, and the media is lying for them. A couple of things here I want to get to. I have very low standards for Barack Obama. I think he's a complete moral degenerate and social misfit, and completely unqualified for the job that he's got, and I think that's becoming more and more obvious even to the people who support him. But the hypocrisy of this guy, I think, knows no limits. There was recently a story on ABC News where he talks about how he encourages his two daughters to stand up for injustices and, quote, protect the vulnerable, Obama said. Quote, we talk about this at the dinner table, and I say to them, listen, if you hear someone using a racial epithet, if you hear someone who's anti-Semitic, if you see an injustice, I want you to speak out. I want you to be firm and clear, and I want you to protect people who may not have voices themselves. I want you to be somebody who's strong and sees themselves as somebody who's looking out for the vulnerable, unquote. Who in the human family, from the moment of fertilization to the moment of natural death, at which stage of that is the human being the most vulnerable?
The unborn.
The unborn, right?
For sure.
And he's got no problem with killing them by the millions.
I hope those two little girls take that advice and they use it against him when they get older and they are wise enough to understand that what their father said is that they need to stand up for the unborn and protect them.
Right. Exactly.
I totally agree. He's speaking truth to them, and that would be the poetic justice at the end if they become, pro-life advocates, because they are part of this pro-life generation that has seen their sonogram, that is excited about the unborn, and it's trying to meld these two worlds together from, I think, their father's generation, which didn't have the access to technology that we have. They might have the social justice thing going on, but now these girls will be the ones who are actually going to see that that does apply to abortion. And I had a great quote when I was actually reading that article, Secular Pro-Life has a board that says, from pacifist to terrorist, each person condemns violence and then adds one cherished case in which it can be justified. That quote is by Gloria Steinem, who's one of my favorite abortos of all time, because the cognitive dissonance that she and Obama have when it comes to this. But how true is that whether you're a pacifist or a terrorist, you have just this one cherished case where you are completely blind to it. And in his case, he's right on with what he's saying. Let's stick up for the vulnerable and those who can't speak for themselves.
Right.
How is he really that
Except-
ignorant that he is missing that one cherished case of the unborn?
Right, except in this one, we'll make an exception because I have a political agenda
Yeah.
here that killing them fulfills, you know, and the hypocrisy of these people, I don't think it knows any bounds. I don't think there's anything these people won't do or say. We had another development this recently. They say there's now going to be a test that a woman can take at 7 weeks to determine the gender of her unborn baby. And you know, we've talked here on previous Life Talks about how every time there's a new medical breakthrough, somehow or another the medical community applies it to abortion. You know, when they talked about how we can diagnose Down syndrome earlier, they don't say so that parents can prepare or we can do this or we can do, no, so the baby can be aborted earlier. And now they're saying the same thing here.
Yeah, when the highest rate of abortion is the first trimester, and they're finding out at the first trimester what the sex is, and
Right.
if it's the
And they're
not
saying,
their flavor, then
they're
they're
saying
going to
this,
abort.
if you don't want a girl and you got a girl, which, and you say, well, why just pick on girls? Well, because studies have shown the vast majority of babies that are killed for sex selection reasons are girls. It's girls that get eliminated, not boys.
And they're doing it in California. They were
Right.
doing it here in the United States.
Well, we had a segment here one time before, Renee, if you remember, where California is setting up a kind of a cottage industry for people in other countries
To
to
fly
come
in.
there to have sex selection abortion.
Yes.
That's where we've headed.
Yeah.
But the medical community has been so devastated by the legality of abortion. It has changed their whole mental attitude about things. It's changed their attitude about how they deal with pregnant women, how they deal with complicated pregnancies, how they deal with things like if you can diagnose something earlier in the pregnancy, well, let's just kill the baby. Let's don't worry about it. We'll just kill this baby and that solves the problem.
It is an exciting time, though, for most people when you do find out the sex of your baby, because you do find that bonding, and you can paint the room and go ahead and buy the clothes
And name them.
and name the baby. And
Right.
yeah, I mean, so it is an exciting time as well. But
Right. But for
Yeah, I think it's scary, the gender selection, though, because like you said, it is absolutely, it's going to eliminate girls the most. And I think feminists worldwide should be outraged by this, not celebrating
But they're
it,
not.
because it is incredibly dangerous, and it kind of builds up that patriarchal society, which says that power comes through males being passed down to males, and that's what this is doing. This is making women even more vulnerable, even in the womb.
But again, Destiny, that's what abortion itself does. And that's why early feminists, that's what they all said.
Yep.
This is something that is used to further enslave women.
And exploit, yeah,
It's done for the purposes of sexually predatory and sexually aggressive males. That's who it's done for. And sexually irresponsible males.
and the fact that Alice Paul saw that so clearly.
Alice
and
Paul, who
yet-
wrote the Equal Rights Amendment, the
Yeah.
original Equal Rights Amendment.
And yet somehow we're so blinded by it today.
It's
It's the
unbelievable.
ultimate exploitation of women, as she says.
Exactly right. We have, in the past, been critical as even though none of us here are Catholic, even when Father Frank is on the show, of sometimes U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops hasn't always taken a firm stand against abortion that they should have. But we got to give them credit. They've issued a statement here recently, a guide, and what they're saying is that if you vote for a pro-abortion candidate, you are a participant in abortion, that you are a participant in an intrinsic evil. They said voting for a candidate specifically because the politician favors a grave evil such as abortion amounts to formal cooperation with that evil by the voter. They're laying out a line in the sand here. They're basically saying to Catholic voters the truth, which is that when you put somebody in office that you know supports legal abortion, you are a participant in those abortions.
Okay, so I want to ask your opinion on this. What about a candidate who is pro-life but makes exceptions for rape and incest? What do you think in those cases?
Well, first off, my argument would be that if you claim to be pro-life, then you make exceptions for rape, incest, or whatever I don't want to look fat in a bathing suit, whatever the argument is, I don't think you're technically pro-life. I think what you are is pro-choice with exceptions, not pro-life with exceptions. Because the moment you say that it is acceptable to kill a baby for some particular reason, then the only difference between you and the pro-abort is where you draw that line. How can you say this? It's okay to kill this baby. I'm pro-life, but you can kill this baby if you want to. You can't say that. Now, in my book, Siege, I address this very issue. And what we have to understand is the distinction between advocating a position and supporting a position if that's the best you can do. There is a distinction between those in politics. But as a matter of principle,
Right.
that's what I'm talking about. You cannot tell me that someone is pro-life if they say, I'm pro-life, but, oh, it's okay to kill this baby, or it's okay to kill this baby over here, or it's okay to kill that baby over there. We've been down this trail so many times. I remember when Kay Bailey Hutchison was a senator from here in Texas. She's a raging pro-abort. Mm-hmm. But if you put her on this panel and ask her about it, she'd say, oh, no, I'm pro-life. And I only support abortion in the first trimester, and after that, only for rape, incest, and life of the mother. Well, okay, that takes in about 97, 98% of all the abortions. But she's pro-life. That's what she claims. So the issue on being pro-life is not what your position on abortion is. It's what your position on the unborn child is. And we have to make sure in the pro-life movement we draw a distinction there. There is a distinction between
Well, and I think, like you said, personally, obviously, I'm no exceptions pro-life. When I look at politicians, though, and one in particular, I love Carly Fiorina, and she makes exceptions for abortion. And so I've actually had to delve into this and try to understand a little bit more about it. And when you look at the polls, 19% of Americans are pro-life, no exceptions. 51% are pro-life with exceptions for, incest in case of the mother. And so for a politician, it actually almost seems smart to me that she makes this exception because that's enough people who would support her so she could get into office, and she would put a lot of restrictions on abortion. And in my mind, if there was a way that we could get a pro-life candidate, which I unlike Kay Bailey Hutchison, I believe Carly is truly pro-life. You can hear her talk about abortion. She values the life of the unborn child, but it's a strategic thing, but it still, as a voter, makes me feel a little bit unsure. However, if we can get a president like that who would, restrict 99% of the abortions, I feel like that would actually be helpful to the children who are vulnerable because of cases of rape and incest, because then you have a whole movement, the whole pro-life movement can focus on that 1% that's vulnerable.
But wait a minute. The flaw in that thinking is, though, you have to separate the principle from the policy.
Right.
And the principle has to be no exceptions. You cannot draw exceptions.
But if you have no exceptions, but you can't get into office, what good does it do?
Wait a minute. If I were running for office, I'd say, look, I don't have any exceptions to the right to life. Either we believe that the unborn child is a living human being, or we don't. And if they are, then we can't say, but it's okay to kill these living human beings. Now, if you're asking me as an elected official, if a bill came to my desk and it said, and we were convinced this is the best we could get, and it said this bill outlaws every abortion except for those as a result of rape or incest, would I sign that bill? Yes. As a politician, I'd sign that bill. And the next morning, I would be out there working to get those exceptions taken away. And that's the thing I write about in Siege. There's a bright line between advocating a position and supporting a position. Those are two different things. You can, and the analogy that I make here in Siege is drunk driving. For years, the standard was 1% alcohol, blood alcohol level, you were drunk. Let's just use Texas, for example. This was true around most of the country. If you went to the MAD people, the Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or anybody like me that would prohibit all alcohol. If you have any alcohol in your system, I don't want you driving a car. They would tell you, we don't want any alcohol in them. But the most we can do in the legislature right now is 0.08. So we can move it down from 0.1 to 0.08. But when you take that 0.08 position, that doesn't mean that that's what you favor. That's just what you're supporting because that's what you can get at the time. So they move it down to 0.08 and then they go after.
But wouldn't you say that candidates who are even running on that platform are doing exactly what you're saying because they know that they have a better shot of getting in office with that exception? If if it is the difference between Kay Bailey and Carly, where Kay Bailey Hutchison's clearly pro-choice and pro-abortion, I would say. versus Carly, who's very pro-life when you hear her talk, so you know it's a strategic thing. Should we feel, I don't know, I mean, are we making moral compromises by voting for somebody who, when you hear them speak about the unborn, you know that they value human life,
Well, wait a minute.
yet they make an exception to get elected?
Right. If our responsibility as a pro-life movement is to better educate this woman,
Right.
using Carly as an example, because I like her too.
But first we have to better educate the, what is it, 81% of America who wouldn't vote for someone who has zero exceptions. I think most Americans view it as a fanatical stance. In the pro-life movement, it's common, 100% of us believe no exceptions because we do understand the life of the unborn, whether, no matter how it got there. And as a feminist, obviously, I don't think a child conceived in rape, that is a patriarchal thing. You're punishing a child for the father's sin. So we understand that. 81% of Americans don't understand that. They view it as an extreme position, and so they will, odds are, not elect someone who says no exceptions.
Okay, that's wrong too. You cannot conclude if someone says, I believe in exceptions for rape and incest, and here's a candidate that's running. Let's say Carly came around and took the principled pro-life position. I don't believe in that position. That doesn't mean they won't vote for him. And that's the mistake that the Republicans, and I used to do some consulting with these guys, I can tell you, they always make that mistake. And that's the mistake the Democrats don't make. So when the Democrats look at a poll of American people and it says almost none of them believe that abortion should be allowed in any circumstance whatsoever with absolutely no restrictions. Almost none of them believe that. But the Democratic Party believes that. That's the position they take. And they recognize that just because, there are tons of people out here that voted for Barack Obama who do not believe in
partial birth abortion.
Abortion or abortion, post-birth abortions or whatever you want to call them. There's tons of people that voted for this degenerate who don't believe that. But the Republicans have this weird view that if you take this poll and a bunch of people disagree with you, they're not going to vote for you. That's not true. And, these guys are out here canonizing Ronald Reagan all the time, and I like Ronald Reagan as well. But if you go back and look at the elections that he won, and he's now probably the most popular president in the last 50 years or so, or 100 years maybe, one of the most popular presidents in our history. The Republicans found out at the time that many of the people that voted for him didn't agree with his positions on issues that were important to them. They just liked him. And they admired him for standing up for a principled position. I would tell Carly Fiorina, look, if you believe that abortion is murder, which is what you say you believe, then why is it not murder when it is applied to a baby that was conceived in rape? You're being inconsistent here. And I think the American people would like you better, even if they disagree with you, if they saw you take a principled position that says this is murder, period, end of story, and I'm going to advance that position. But you've got to draw a distinction between the advocacy of a position and the acceptance of it, or the support for it, which is what we've done in every other form of our political life. And it's kind of like another thing I talk about in the Siege book, this new book I have. The pro-life movement already accepts this concept in other areas. For example, sidewalk counseling. We know good and well that sidewalk counselors all over this country today are doing heroic work. They're saving babies. There are babies walking around out there because of sidewalk counselors. We talk to them all the time. We provide materials for them all the time, right? We know they do. But every sidewalk counselor that's walking onto the streets today in front of an abortion clinic knows for a fact that they're not going to save all the babies. They're not going to save all the women that they talk to that walk in. As a matter of fact, they're only going to save a very small percentage of them, right? But no one in the pro-life movement looks at them and then says, well, you're compromising your position because you don't save every one of them, right? We don't say that. And what I'm saying is that we've got to give that same latitude in the political process that we give in the sidewalk counseling process. We don't look down our noses at sidewalk counselors who are not efficient at saving every baby. We don't do that. So politicians are in that same position. They cannot save every baby every time. But we need to work toward that. That needs to be our goal, right? At all times, that has to be our goal. That has to be our principle. And if you ask a sidewalk counselor that's walking onto the sidewalk stand, I know you do a lot of work with sidewalk counselors. are you there to save every baby? What would they say?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But the fact is you're not going to, right?
Right.
So why are you going on that sidewalk? If you can't save every one of them, why are you going?
Better to save
The
some
ones you
than
can.
none. But again, that's why it's like with Carly, she believes in 99.4% of cases
I understand that.
being outlawed, and it's that 0.06%. I just feel like supporting her, I don't necessarily feel morally conflicted, even though I have great friends like Rebecca Kiesling and Ryan Bomberger who are conceived in rape, and they're advocates for that 1%, which is actually 0.06%, they say mostly. But
We should be.
but I honestly think we would be serving children vulnerable because they're conceived in rape better if we could focus just on them, because a majority of other cases were already taken care of by the law. And maybe it's the libertarian in me, but I feel like the government, it's great to outlaw stuff, but the saying that we have to make abortion unthinkable, not just illegal. And so until there's a cultural change, they're going to happen. But if we can at least put more restrictions and make it more difficult, you talk about in Siege that even just raising the price of abortion by $25, which I was shocked, that suddenly cuts down on the number of women willing to abort. Like if we can just start.
And by the way, it's not
shrinking
me saying
pool.
that. It was Warren Hearn who wrote the book. He's a late-term abortionist in Colorado who wrote the book Abortion Practice, which is kind of the industry standard for him. He says that if you raise the price of an abortion $25, your patient load plummets. That was his quote.
Which that blows my mind. So, but it kind of proves that point that the more kind of obstacles we put in the way, the
Right.
woman who feels like this is her only choice, but once it gets difficult, she suddenly kind of finds other ways where she can continue in that pregnancy. And I think we need to be helping women get to that place. Let us help you, like you said, with sidewalk counseling. That is the number one thing we offer, is let us help you remove those other obstacles.
Well, again, we have to draw a distinction though between the principle and the policy, the principle and the political realities that you have to deal with, and that is the principal reality that you have to deal with. And so her position is unprincipled. Her political position is better than who she's going to be running against. And
Right.
Father Frank and I have had this discussion many times, and one of the things he's always said to me is sometimes you vote for somebody to keep somebody else out. And so, when you start looking at who the other side is, when you start looking at these raging baby killers like Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and all the other godless leftist Democrats that are going to be out there running, then again, you sometimes may have to take the position that we're going to vote for this person to keep this person out.
Right.
That's what has to happen. But
At the end of the day, I think we are talking about a culture change, though, and so it's not so much her, because I think her heart's in the right place. I think she wants to save 100% of the babies. I think it's strategic because she is looking at the polling numbers and looking at what she believes the American people want, and that's where we have to change the culture. Is with that 81% that's going to be concerned and not go for the extremes. We have to open their eyes to the fact that a child is a child is a child, no matter how.
If I were advising the
about.
Republicans, I think the salient question here is that, and I'm not advising the Republicans, I don't care one way or the other about the Republicans, but if I were advising these people, I'd say, if you want to talk about abortion against Hillary Clinton, ask her a very simple question. You say you're not pro-abortion and that you're a rational, reasonable person. Tell me one abortion that you think should be prohibited by law. Tell me one. And don't let her weasel out. When she starts, because she's going to see she's in the trap. Because she does not want to make that statement. Well, I don't think any of them should be stopped. She doesn't want to make that statement in front of the American people. So she's going to try to weasel out. And what you've got to do is you've got to be aggressive. You've got to say, wait a minute, Ms. Clinton.
A woman who's in labor, 1 minute from delivery, can we abort her baby?
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever. Tell me the abortions you think should not be allowed by law. Tell me what they are. But we always wait around for them to put us in that trap.
Right.
You'd force a woman who's raped to have the baby of her rapist, right? Well, the fact is that it's a tiny percent, less than 1%. Mm-hmm. And that's what we argue about. I would ask Hillary Clinton, if a woman says to you, I've had 4 abortions already, and Renee and I have had this conversation with women that have called in here. I've had 4 abortions already. I know it's murder. I don't want to be pregnant through the summer. I've been pregnant through the summer before. I don't want to be pregnant through the summer. I'm going to have an abortion right now. Should that be allowed?
And by Hillary Clinton standards, absolutely.
And she's 23 weeks pregnant. Should that be allowed?
Yeah.
Right? Force Hillary Clinton in public to say yes, that should be
Yeah.
allowed, right? You want to push people out to the extremes, then do that. But as far as this other situation, I think that, I mean, Carly, if you just use her as an example, she's obviously an incredibly intelligent woman. I think that in a debate against Hillary Clinton, she would just absolutely devastate this woman. And I think she's the kind that would ask that question, like I just posed. Tell me one abortion that you don't think should be legally allowed. Tell me one. I think Carly Fiorina is the kind that would ask that question and force her to answer it. But we still have some work to do with people like that to make them understand the principle better. And the issue is not, the pro-life position is not that abortion should be prohibited. The pro-life position is that the unborn child is a living human being from the moment of fertilization and is entitled to the same rights as any other living human being is entitled to. And so we need to refocus this, not on abortion. Because when we do that, we give people like Hillary Clinton the ability to say things like, oh, I'm opposed to abortion. I don't like abortion. I've never been a fan of abortion. But then she goes on to defend abortion. Said, hey, I don't care what your position on abortion is. I don't care what you feel about it. I don't care what you think about it. I don't care what your opinion is. What I want to know is, do you believe that the unborn child is a living human being from the moment of fertilization and entitled to the same rights as every other living human being? If you answer that negatively, then we know what you are. If you answer it positively, you don't have to get into the exceptions because there's no exceptions for born people. So we've got to tie the born and the unborn together. That's something that has to happen. This is something that I think we've made a mistake is we get hung up on abortion when the issue is not abortion. The issue is what's
Personhood of the unborn.
what is your position on the unborn child? That's what I want to know, right?
You know, Mark, when I came here 5 years ago, I went to one of my son's basketball practice, and I told them that I was starting in a pro-life organization, and they said that they were totally against abortion except for rape and incest, and I didn't know how to argue that point. And it's not about abortion. The issue is not about abortion, but it is about the unborn.
You're exactly right, Renee. That's the point I've been trying to make, is that it doesn't matter what somebody's position on abortion is. What matters is their position on the unborn child. If their position's right there, their position on abortion will fall in place. And if it's not right there, their position on abortion doesn't matter. So that's the key thing that we need to emphasize. We need to stick on that. What do you think about the unborn child? And that's all that matters. That's all we need to be asking these people when we're looking at who to vote for or who to give our support to, whatever. That's the only issue that matters. Anyway, it was a great show and it was a great discussion, and I appreciate it. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of Life Talk. Until we see you again, remember, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight. We're here to win, because winning is how the killing stops.